I am so pleased to be here at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee with Morgonn McMichael. She is a contributor to Turning Point USA. She's 24 years old. She's a social media influencer, a writer, a speaker. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited.
Well, I'm really excited to talk to you and to talk about what is driving young people right now? What are the issues that they're really passionate about and concerned about? I'm a millennial, and it's amazing how fast things change. I feel like I'm already a little bit out of touch with Gen Z. When you talk to your friends, what are those issues that they say, hey, this is why I'm getting involved, or this is why I'm choosing to vote for so-and-so?
Yeah, I will say on the conservative side, we're just jumping right in. I love this. So when I travel across the country, I interview a lot of students in colleges and high school. You know, what is the biggest issue happening in our country today? Mm-hmm. What is the biggest issue that's impacting our generation? And a lot of the times now, when I see from college-age students and college graduates, is inflation. Because they're worried about how much money they're going to have in their bank accounts when they graduate, when they have their jobs. How are their 401ks going to look? Are they going to be able to buy a house in the future? And these are things that even me as a 24-year-old Gen Zer, I'm thinking about as well. I would love to be able to afford to buy a house one day. I would love to be able to have Social Security checks in my future, but looking at the national debt, it's a little bit concerning. And so I don't want to say that Gen Z just focuses on social issues, because I think that's what our generation kind of gets a rap for lately is, you only care about the pro-life, pro-choice debate and abortion. You only care about the LGBTQ movement, whether you're for or against it. But I will say, I think a lot of Gen Z is starting to wake up to more of the economic side of politics and policy issues on top of inflation. I will say immigration is one that's on the lower end. I know that immigration in a broad spectrum of all U.S. voters is a concern. It's one of the biggest issues. But for Gen Z, I don't think they're seeing really the tangible effects that the illegal immigration crisis is having on them yet.
That's interesting to hear. What was your journey? Like I said, you're a contributor for Turning Point USA. How did you get involved in the political space?
Oh my goodness. So I grew up in California. In 2016, I was a junior in high school, and my government teacher wouldn't accept conservative news outlets for my daily report papers or anything, and I would get graded down. And so being a 16-year-old kind of facing this cancel culture in a sense from a teacher was really discouraging. I ended up going to college in Texas, was almost kicked out of my sorority.
Oh, wow.
In a nutshell, just for holding conservative values, especially during 2020, during COVID. And that's when I realized, there's not enough Gen Zers out there that are speaking the truth, talking about conservatism, talking about Christianity even. And that's when I found Turning Point USA, joined a chapter, and now I like to say I dropped out of college for Charlie Kirk, because we all say that college is a scam at Turning Point USA, and it's really just an incredible opportunity to be surrounded by so much like-mindedness and be able to reach out to many college and high school chapters that we have across the country.
What do you think are maybe some of the misconceptions about Gen Zers?
Ooh, this is a good question. I've asked this before. I think the biggest misconception is that we're misled or that we're uninformed, which I can't understand when you look at where is Gen Z getting their news from, especially this election cycle. Well, they're turning towards TikTok, they're turning towards Instagram. Facebook is a little bit boomer for Gen Z. And so when you're looking at these social media platforms, well, who owns them? Who is giving them money? What campaigns are primarily on the platforms? And you don't see as many conservative politicians that are on those apps promoting their ideas. Plus, of course, we face censorship sometimes. So it's kind of this interesting paradox that I feel like I have to deal with a lot. Gen Z is getting their information from social media. So how do we combat that?
So then how should like I said, I'm a millennial. Yeah. How should I be thinking about Gen Z? How should our older audiences be thinking about Gen Z, especially because we know that there are those key differences. Gen Z is the first generation to grow up not knowing a world without social media. How has that changed the game?
It has completely changed the game, and I think that more people need to utilize social media for campaigns and to get their messages heard. Think about Gen Z. 41 million members of my generation will be eligible to vote in this next election, one of the largest voting blocks, and I think that is something that is underutilized. I think that Gen Z, I said they're kind of lost people. That's a misconception that we have, and I think millennials, Gen Xers, instead need to go to Gen Z and actually provide the truth and the facts and encourage them, because we're not all dumb, we're not all lost, we do our research, but there are a lot of people in our generation that are consumed by social media, so we have to combat the narrative that is pushed on there and provide an alternative narrative and talk about the truth.
Who are the voices that yourself and your fellow young conservatives are listening to and maybe really excited by, whether they're political commentators that you all are really flocking to get your news, or they're actual members of Congress, political voices, or new rising leaders that you all are really looking to as the future?
I mean, for me, Turning Point is like a great resource for me. I listen to a lot of independent journalists because I think that that truly is the future outside of the mainstream media. Of course, you have all of the big media companies, but Gen Z is not listening to those. One thing that I want to see, though, is more culture-based, pop culture-based commentators start to bring in what their values are. It doesn't necessarily need to be outwardly talking about politics and policy, but there's a lot of influential people on the internet. You know, you have pop culture, you have Alex Earl, who is like very huge in culture. You have a lot of these podcasters in the Christian world, culture world, pop culture world that are just talking about more the mundane things in life. But I think there's a deeper meaning and truth in our country, and we're craving that truth. And I think that a lot of these social media influencers are dumbing down our generation by just talking about fluff, talking about things that don't really matter in our generation, where if they just inserted a little bit of their opinions and got away from, I can't be too controversial, they could actually make a really big impact. So lately I've been encouraging some of my friends that are more culture commentators instead of political commentators, you know, just talk about what's going on in our country.
Yeah.
Talk about just some of the little issues and inspire other people to do more research. You don't have to insert your opinion. I know, you know, Daily Wire, I listen to a lot of their stuff, Breitbart, but lately I've been really focusing on independent journalists and media to actually get the truth.
And well, that draws me to something that I've heard specifically about Gen Z, which is that you all look for authenticity and you can spot you know what I, yes. It's still very early.
It is.
Very, very clearly. And you pick up on it and then you'll sort of tune out.
Right.
If you're like, someone's being inauthentic, I'm not going to listen. Is that a fair assessment, would you say?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I think Gen Z, more than ever, is craving the truth because we're sick of being lied to.
Yeah.
You know, look at the fact checkers. Look at how we just saw Elon Musk buying Twitter, now it's X, and seeing how the turn of that platform has been comparing to Meta, comparing to like owned by Instagram. So it's very interesting to see how the political landscape has changed, but then also just the craving for, you know, I'm tired of just being lied to by the government and by big tech companies, by the news, by headlines. Look at the Saturday headlines of Donald Trump's assassination attempt, popping noises. He falls. None of that was true. And it's like, why are these platforms continuing to false report where you open up Twitter and you knew exactly what was happening? So yes, Gen Z is craving the truth.
I have a theory about many young people, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on it. My theory is that many young people are actually conservative. They just don't know that they're conservative because no one has ever really explained issues to them and where, if you think this way, okay, you're probably actually on this side of the aisle. Do you think that's true?
I actually agree.
Okay.
Especially when I'm out on these college campuses, a lot of students nowadays are just really scared to speak out at all because they don't want to get marked down on their papers by their professors or face cancel culture among their friends or Greek life, sororities and fraternities. And it makes me really sad. What I think about, you know, Gen Z is a little bit more conservative. Look at the 18 to 24-year-old range. We are polling in a conservative direction more than we ever have before. And high school boys are trending conservative, while not necessarily high school women, which is a little bit of a problem, which I have the feminist movement
You're
to blame
working
for that.
on.
We're working on it. Okay, I promise I'm working on it. I'm trying my best. But I think that has a lot to do with the social issues because women are more emotional. You know, we care more about the social issues. We care, you know, women's rights. They talk about abortion a lot to young women. And I really do think that that's why women tend to stray to the left more than to the right. But when you actually sit down with a woman and talk about it from an economic perspective, from a policy perspective, I've met a lot of women who may be more socially liberal, but they're actually very fiscally conservative and they will tend to still vote right.
Very interesting. Yeah. Tell us how we can follow you, keep up with all of your work.
You guys can follow me anywhere on Turning Point USA platforms. If you can spell my name, you can find me. Morgonn on Instagram, on Twitter, YouTube, all of the places.
Amazing. Morgan, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the RNC.